So we want you to, after lunch, we're going to ask to report back on your top ideas. So table facilitators, please support to find somebody at the table who'd be willing to report back, reading what's there on the flip chart or whatever other notes you've got, so you can share with us what your top priorities were. So please do that. The next thing I want to do is something that is a useful understanding about kind of who is in the room, is to talk about the selection process. So I'd like to invite up my colleague Andrew Rockway, who's supported this project in an innumerable amount of amazing ways. So you can give us an overview of.
So just last thing before lunch, so I promise I'll go quick. My name is Andrew Rockway, as Susanna said. So just a bit about how this came to be. So we started with our recruitment process. We sent out approximately 10,000 mailers, postcards. Quick question, yeah?
Where to?
So we sent out 10,000 postcards within the study area. So you see the study area goes north up to the port, south down to Great Northern Way, east down to Commercial, and west is back in Quebec, Columbia. So within that study area, we sent out 10,000 mailers. We sent out a few extra hundred around to citywide residents. You may have seen that come, but we were really focused on the study area. We also did promotion through media, social media, etc. Within that process, then folks applied to participate, filled out an application. So we had about 200, give or take, people fill out this application to volunteer to participate on the Flats Arterial Community Panel. And then from there, we narrowed it down to the 42 folks that you see here in the room. And the way that we process that narrowing is to try to, as closely as possible, align with Stats Canada data and the best available municipal City of Vancouver data in terms of getting a breakdown that looks like this. So we wanted to have a panel that was as closely as possible representative of the study area in this community. And so what that looks like is we have approximately about 62% folks who identify as white, 29% who in the Stats Canada language identify as visible minorities, and then about 10% that identify as Indigenous. And within this demographics, this is about 5% for the visible minority population, an underrepresentation of the study area, and for the white population, an overrepresentation of 5%. So it's pretty close, but not perfect, and that's kind of what we aim for. Then we have 20 folks who identify as females in the room, 20 folks who identify as male in the room, and 2 folks that identify as non-binary or third gender. And then if you can see on the lower section, we had 6 folks in the age cohort of 16 to 29. We had 12 identify in the 30 to 44 age cohorts. Just under that for the 45 to 64 cohort, and about 8 for the 65 plus age cohort. And that aligns really closely with again, the demographics of the study area in this community. So for that, we got pretty close, and that is the makeup of this group and who's in the room in terms of that relationship to the study area, the community overall. So I just wanted to highlight that so you learn a little bit about this process. We'll see if we can't. We'll include this materials in the online materials. It's not in your notebook, as there were some last-minute changes based on panelists dropping out and finding a replacement.
That's Stats Canada?
We used Stats Canada data kind of at the neighborhood level to look at what was in the study area. Yep. Any other questions about that? Yeah.
No, I didn't mean to figure about the circle of the mail outs, but
sure.
I spoke with at least 3 panelists that didn't get the mail out, and that's why I wanted to ask if it was an accident or just...
Some people didn't get a mailer. Somebody heard about it through social media or a friend or somebody that did get a mailer and said, hey, maybe you can sign up for this, and that's totally fine. So some folks got mailers, some folks didn't, and that it was just one mechanism for reaching people and informing people about this.
And these people were all within the mail out once. I just wanted to maybe get it posted, delivered, strike.
It was right in the middle of the strike, so that didn't help things.
I wanted to bring it to your attention in case you didn't realize that there were quite a few people that didn't get mail outs.
Yeah, got it. I know we didn't mail it to every household. I know that in the city area. Yep.
There's,
Thanks
there's
for the
far
question.
more households than we had budget to send mailings to, but that's why we also, in addition to the things that Andrew described, we also had community outreach folks that were out for a total of 45 hours going out and standing at the parks and the community centers and reaching out to people that might not have gotten it by email or might not have gotten it by mail, and working with community centers, folks to be able to have paper applications, and we did a lot of various levels, but it wasn't totally widespread. You had a question?
Hi, I'm just wondering, do you have, so this is just based on like ethnicity and gender. Is there also a breakdown of the representation in terms of like area residents?
Yes,
business
there
owners,
is.
blah,
Let's
blah,
see
blah.
the next slide. Thank you very much. I'll pay you later. So the local resident breakdown. So you can see here that there's a mix of density in where the local residents live. So this is Clark Drive is this? Is that Clark? Okay, yeah. Okay, so there's Clark, there's Hastings, and then I'm not exactly sure what those pieces are. I'd have to look at a detailed one. But you can see that there's a spread, and we actually were recruiting in 3 different areas. We were recruiting in this area, and this area. But then we wanted to make for you to see kind of the diversity of where people ended up, but without pointing out people's exact homes. And again, we'll post this on the internet so you can get a better version. Then the local and citywide breakdown in terms of residents. We also had 6 residents from around the city, so you can see they're in various parts of the city. We wanted to make sure we had different perspectives about moving through the city. And then lastly, we also have business participants. People are here because they own, operate, or are employed at a business in the study area. And you can see here what the density is in terms of the different areas there as well. And we made sure that we had as much as possible, at least 2 people on the panel that were impacted by each route. Unfortunately, people's schedules changed. Somebody had to drop out recently because he had to fly to China and take care of some of the manufacturing issues. But we're pretty close to making sure we have people from all the different routes. So that's kind of how we would describe the diversity. Any more questions about how we ended up in the room? Yeah.
As far as the diversity is concerned, I think it's actually use the Stats Canada stuff instead of local.
Well, we use Stats Canada data
For
for
West Nancy.
this area.
For this area. okay,
But,
that's
so one thing that we added so Stats Canada only asks about 2 genders, and we know that that's not the reality for people. So we also use City of Vancouver data in order to try to get a more representative amount. But I just want to underline what Andrew said. We actually got pretty close in terms of most of these key demographics. Yes?
Can you speak to whether or not the population projections for this area and the state of based off of the neighborhood as it is now is going to be what it will be?
So the question was about population projections, about who we are now, who this neighborhood is now, and who it will be in the future. And we did not anticipate that when we were selecting. But I want to bring up that piece about that's something I want you to hold on to as you go through, is that we're not just planning for today, but we're planning for the future. And that's a question that if, do you want to just make a note of that, and we can see if some of the plans have future population projections, so we can make that available to you. So I want to get you to lunch, but I also don't want to not answer questions if people have questions about kind of the process. I think the last thing is probably to say is that the random selection process means that it's totally blind. So it goes through kind of a computer generator that pulls out a group that looks, that gets the diversity that we're hoping for. And then when we finalize the selection, there's no names or email addresses. We don't have any of that. And so when we finally got the panel selected, I was like, oh, wow. I mean, I didn't even know half the time until we were actually talking to folks. So, and one last question, I guess. Yes.
Hi, thank you for sharing this. I'm curious in terms of the design of the panel and the consideration of the values that went into this, and understanding the need for local inclusion, which is totally great and everything. But I'm also thinking about too often these processes only take into consideration local people and not other people, young people, other marginalized communities that might not be here right now. I'm thinking of future young people. How is that contemplated in terms of the makeup of the feedback that's going to be generated in this process? Not just the people who live in the area, but the future people, the city that might be impacted by this.
Yeah, and again, I would say that that's an important lens to bring to the work we're doing, to remember that we're not all at the table in a variety of ways, in ages you're talking about, but also in terms of ability and in terms of like all sorts of other things that's important for us to hold on to as we think about who are we planning for, who is this city for. But I will say that the minimum age to participate was 16, and we went out and we talked to young people and we cajoled them and tried, bribed them and well, we didn't bribe them, but we thought about it. Anyway, we were really thinking about how to get the diversity in the room. So the last slide I just want to do before we go to lunch is you have heard from a variety of different people, and I want to just do a formal introduction to everybody. So I'm Susanna, and I'm the panel chair. Michelle, would you give a wave? Many of you met Michelle as you were coming in. She's our panelist liaison. Yay! And taking care of all sorts of details and making things possible. So if you have any needs, whether if the room's too hot or too cold, or you couldn't find the handout or whatever it is, please talk to Michelle. She's your point person, and she'll make sure that your needs get met. Kyle, our project principal, you met him this morning. Andrew, he's our technical lead, not only in terms of also helping to lead with the selection process, but also in bringing all the panel content of the learning materials that you've been going, supporting the speakers to get their work together. Angela, where are you? There she's Angela at the back. We can thank her for all the delicious food and organizing and the hospitality. Thank you. And then, of course, we have these wonderful table facilitators. Can I have you guys stand up for a minute, please? So these folks, they're not panel members. Instead, they are folks that are interested in urban planning or in dialogue and deliberation or in all sorts of related fields, political efficacy and all these things. So do get a chance to get to know them at some point because they are a very interesting and talented group. So, Angela, are there any instructions about lunch that we need to communicate to people?